Hey guys, what's up? So, we're going to be talking about a movie that I think just came out like a week ago on Netflix called Bliss, starring Owen Wilson and Salma Hayek, which is a really interesting combination I wouldn't expect. This film, if I were boil it down to one word, it would be potential. It had a lot of potential. The premise is very interesting. Very early on, I mean, you don't really believe that what he's thinking is real. It wasn't really one of those, like, is it real or is it not kind of things. You could have thought maybe it could be real, but it was not really. It was about a man who was just spiraling downward. And this is his coping mechanism, especially a drug induced coping mechanism. It's kind of like sometimes when you see somebody and they're kind of in their own world. This was kind of their version of that, which it was very unique. It could have been offensive. I don't think it was, which is nice, especially because he didn't get particularly violent, which is great because they could have gone that route and it would have been like not realistic because those people are not particularly violent. So I thought I thought it was a cool premise done on a good job. Now, where did it go wrong, in my opinion? When you have such a unique premise that has so many different layers to it and it's trying to execute on something that is so chaotic, it's very easy to be messy. And that's what happened. We got a very messy end product. And I'll elaborate on that. But first, I actually still really enjoyed watching the film for the reasons I kind of described. But so let's talk about some of the positives. The acting was relatively strong actually in this film. I give it to them. Both Salma Hayek. I'm not even talking about the side characters because it's not really about them. But Salma Hayek and Owen Wilson did great job. Salma Hayek is a very unique actress in that if the movie isn't that good, she tends to be very bad in it. Like in a Grown Ups or something like that, it almost like showcases her incompetence as an actor, which is really weird. Like some of the line delivery just seems weird. It seems like she's never acted before. Now, if it's a more serious role or a role with higher stakes, a film with more depth to it, she can pull off a pretty good performance. So she's actually a very confusing actress to me, in my opinion. At her best, she's pretty decent, but she's very inconsistent, so I wouldn't consider her that good of an actress. But she's done things like Freya and things like that really make her shine. I thought she did a really good job in this film. I know some people think it could have been a little bit crazy, but I don't think her performance was crazy. I think the material was crazy, her dialogue was crazy, and I think she sold it really well. Actually, in my opinion, I think she went above and beyond as an actress because it was so weird. And she didn't go like full Jared Leto as Joker weird. She like kept it in the realm of reality, especially because she was his like mind's coping mechanism for this downward spiral and trying to convince himself. And she was like a personification of some of his emotions. And so they were crazy and she should have been crazy, but like she was doing a really good job of like balancing that, being grounded as a person, but actually being a personification of these emotions. So she did like a wonderful job, in my opinion, in that she really brought an energy that kept me engaged throughout. Especially when you really know what's going on, you know that he's just spiraling, so you know what her goals are as his like mind's protection against reality, and like so she sells it. Every time she says something weird, she sells it and I believe it. Every time he's trying to convince himself that it's not real because of these plot holes, she convinces him in a more ludicrous way each time. And I really like that. With Owen Wilson, he did this really good dichotomy. Owen Wilson can be a pretty solid, serious actor. If you've seen him in certain of his dramatic roles, I'd recommend it. In this one, he did a really good job of doing the dichotomy of being aloof but also being hyper engaged. That's really difficult. It doesn't even make a lot of sense. It almost sounds like an oxymoron because you felt the aloofness of him with the reality, but then he was hyper engaged in his fake world that he made because it was kind of built by him. And he did that like kind of like glassy eyed, like doesn't know what's going on thing, but then gets really hyper engaged, and he balanced it really well. And I felt tonally he kept it pretty even, so I really enjoyed it. So performances wise, I actually really liked our co-leads. I think they did a fantastic job. Premise was really interesting. I felt I was engaged throughout, but it just starts to get hectic. And it was one of those movies where the pacing was like very rushed and then very slow. Like they didn't balance it at all. There were certain times where like too much was happening, especially like when he was in the fake world, like, you know, when he like goes into the other world, the fake world that he thinks is the real world. There's parts of that is super long, like way too long, and then it like everything starts falling apart. And I get it. It's his withdrawal and coming back to reality because he doesn't have anything. He's not on drugs anymore. I thought that made sense to me, and I get it that he's pulling him back kind of quickly. But it felt like in the pacing of the movie, like slow. Oh, I love this world. Oh yeah. And then they're just trying to explain all these things, and they're trying to like flesh out this world that doesn't really matter in the end. You know, that's not world building. World building for the sake of nothing. And as an art form, I get that. It was actually really beautiful to watch what his mind could come up with in this state. But like overall, it didn't benefit the film as a film watching experience. There's art, and then there's entertainment or film watching experience. There's differences. Artistically, I thought it was a pretty interesting movie, but like that pacing didn't really help as a viewer. I don't know that I think it would have been better if it was almost believable that maybe it is real. Maybe it was good that we just always kind of knew because it was so ludicrous. But I just think that there was something missing in terms of what's the purpose. So when I mean purpose, I want to make sure that I'm saying it correctly. Where it was leading to didn't feel like it was a very heavily driven aspect. I didn't feel Owen Wilson's character getting somewhere as opposed to being this passive participant. And I think we were trying to figure out where this was going to go. If they wanted it to go to the rehab, which to be fair, I actually think the rehab, him going into rehab, should have been the last scene. I don't think they needed the extra scene. I think him just going to rehab would have been great as opposed to him like having a moment with his daughter. I think that would have been cool. And I think that last scene, the way I would have done it is really fake reality. And as he starts to walk away from it, it starts to become a blend. A little bit less fake each time until it becomes the real reality. And he ends up at the rehab center and he would have walked in, they would have ended the scene. That I think should have been the ending of the film. It would have made a very powerful statement. Even with that ending, the reason that it felt like it was lacking, not even just because it was messy, is that Owen Wilson didn't feel like he was driving anything. The only reason I like the scene of him in the rehab center, actually, ending in the rehab would have been cool, but I like the scene in the rehab center where he just sits down. I would have ended him with him sitting down, him saying, I believe her. Someone says she's my daughter, and I believe her. That would have been the ending moment, cut to black. Would have been really powerful. I think a lot of times films don't know when to just cut when it's really good. And that would have been cool, but it should have been Owen Wilson driving the narrative forward at some point. He's this passive participant, but he keeps asking more questions, which he wasn't doing in the beginning. In the beginning, he believed it, and then he started asking more questions. And Salma Hayek's character, aka his like mind, had to come up with more BS answers that didn't make any sense at that point. And I think that could have been like the transition of him starting to maybe play more of an active role. And then instead they ended it with, you know, the cops coming because he confronted his boss and all that jazz. And then he kind of just he lets Salma Hayek go. He lets that fake reality go by having her like turn herself in his mind. You know what he's doing. That didn't feel like it was a solid ending. It should have been more of a I have to let you go, as opposed to like him kind of realizing in his mind that he needs to let her go. It should have been like a very active choice. As an art form, I get that. That's really cool. And artistically, the movie had a lot going for it. But in terms of as a movie-going experience, it just felt like there's these things that they could have done to made us just be that much more engaged with the film's direction. And I think that could have been like one of its biggest moments of him, after asking all these questions, realizing that it's not real. It also needed something to make him realize. It needed a scene, a really long, intense scene where he starts to put the pieces together, or a scene where he thinks about his daughter. It needed that scene really badly. If they would have made it not as messy, they would have added that scene, transition, and ended when he says, I believe her, that could have been a very powerful film. I give them credit for what they were trying to do because it was really cool. A lot of times you just kind of see it from the outside, like you'll see it from the society's perspective, or you'll see it from a guy's perspective but outside, the way we kind of saw Joker. We saw him like one step out and just watching him and just having our heart break. This one was like being in it and watching all the things that happen. And we don't really get that perspective. And a lot of times that's a hard perspective to do because you're not in that position. So what you're doing is maybe not 100% accurate. But in that case, I thought they at least did a cool job of trying to make it unique, but not judging the character, not a joke, but just like a reality. They took his fake world very seriously. I appreciate that. They almost took it a little too seriously where it just became like the whole thing. You didn't need to know all of the little anecdotes and all the little exposition of like the world he was building. It's good for the art, bad for the movie. I hope someone gives another stab at this concept because it was really cool. And I felt, even if in all its mess, I could not stop watching the TV to try to figure out where it was gonna go. Just wasn't that satisfying towards the end. All right, guys, let me know what you think. How you perceive the acting. I gave you guys a perspective as an actor, certain things that I saw them do as acting choices that I thought were particularly powerful, as someone who's trained in that. But please let me know what you think. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I'll catch you in the next one.